Ouais, mute la salle. Puis lui peut-être juste l'allumer pour qu'il puisse sortir dans le speaker. Parfait. Hi, how are you? Can you hear me? Toi, est-ce que tu l'entends? Tu vois-tu quelque chose qui module? OK. Yeah, we cannot hear you though. There's still no sound coming from you, George. Là, t'entends quelque chose? OK. Veux-tu le mettre dans les speakers juste pour voir qu'on... Veux-tu le mettre sur les speakers pour qu'on puisse l'entendre qu'est-ce qu'il dit? Can you speak again, George? Yeah, I think we heard you. Can you speak again?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's fine. Thanks.
Now it's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone, and bon appétit. So my name is Quentin Dupetit. I work for Expertise France, which is the French governmental agency that design and implement a cooperation project. And I coordinate the BioDev 2030 program, which we will explain a bit later. So just to give you a few introduction on this side events. The COP15 is key for international negotiation, of course, on biodiversity, but it's also a key moment to share experiences, to share the views on different projects, on different initiatives, from different countries. And in our case, with the post 2020 and the BioDev projects, we realized that we had many common points on the different topics, such as mainstreaming biodiversity into key economic sectors, such as multi-stakeholders dialogue. What are the key factors to conduct a multi-stakeholders dialogue, and what are the key elements to mainstream biodiversity and to reach this inclusive governance that we need to reach the whole of society that we need. So just to this small introduction, and then we will go a bit further into each of these projects. But yeah, on the first part, we will focus on the BioDev 2030 initiative and experience that we've been conducting for 3 years. So we will first have a video, then we will explain a bit what is the project, and Antonin, my colleague from IUCN, will go a bit further into the assessment of main threats to biodiversity. What are the key lessons from these 3 years project? And then we will give the floor to first national focal points from Ethiopia, who has been involved in the project and who has been really part as a stakeholders of the BioDev initiative and the multi-stakeholders dialogue. And then we will give the floor to a representative from the private sector who is with us today, Mr. Luis from Mozambique, and who will give us his point of view on what are the key elements to conduct a multi-stakeholders dialogue, and what are the expectations of the private sector when we talk about biodiversity mainstreaming. So this will be the first part with 2 testimonies, and on the second part we will go a bit further into the inclusive governance, showcasing the post 2020 experience and showcasing many speakers that have been supported by the post 2020 projects. So we will have testimonies from many different stakeholders, such as Costa Rica, the national focal point of Costa Rica, an expert on data collection in Costa Rica. We will have some testimonies also from WWF International, from Business for Nature, from the youth representatives, from ICLEI, the cities, from ECLAC, the Latin America and Caribbean countries, and then from the state of Sao Paulo. So we will have a very complete panel and a very rich panelist, very rich panel to showcase this need of inclusive governance. So just before talking about BioDev, we wanted to show you a short video. Can we go to the next slide, please?
La situation de la biodiversité actuellement dans le monde est qualifiée de la 6e extinction de masse des espèces.
Le monde court à la catastrophe. Si toutes ces espèces disparaissent, l'homme même disparaîtra. BioDev 2030, c'est le projet de facilitation d'engagement pour la biodiversité qui a pour objectif d'inverser la tendance de la dégradation des ressources naturelles de la biodiversité d'ici 2030 et de la restaurer à l'horizon 2050.
Les 3 piliers du projet BioDev sont tout d'abord le diagnostic scientifique. le dialogue et puis les engagements permettant de réduire les pressions sur la biodiversité.
C'est un projet de dialogue structuré autour du diagnostic scientifique pour convaincre les acteurs du secteur privé comment est-ce que les activités ont des menaces sur la biodiversité afin de les amener à travers un dialogue sectoriel à prendre des engagements volontaires.
Pour la première fois, le gouvernement, la société civile, le secteur privé se sont réunis autour de la même table pour discuter des enjeux liés à la conservation de la biodiversité et pour définir ensemble des actions possibles qui permettraient de préserver la biodiversité.
Biodev n'est pas resté dans les quatre coins d'un mur pour penser à la place des acteurs. Les acteurs ont été mis autour d'une table. Les réflexions ont abouti à des engagements volontaires.
C'est une conscientisation de comment, dans notre activité désormais, on peut être très regardant à la protection de la biodiversité.
Avec les innovations que nous développons, on constate aujourd'hui que la terre n'est plus polluée. La biodiversité aussi n'est pas polluée. Le sol se restaure.
On souhaite vraiment que l'engagement soit spécifique, mesurable, atteignable, avec des résultats temporels, afin de nous permettre d'ici 2030 de pouvoir mesurer l'impact des actions que les acteurs sectoriels auraient pris pour pouvoir voir vraiment qu'il y a une réduction des menaces.
Les engagements qui ont été pris doivent passer maintenant à la pratique.
Thank you. Maybe we can go to the next slide now. Yes, thank you. So the video was pretty clear. So it's a dialogue project that is based on science, grounded in science. So BioDev for biodiversity and the development. We've been working now for 3 years to mainstream biodiversity into key economic sectors in 16 countries. So the countries include 13 countries in Africa. We work with Tunisia, we work with Mozambique, Kenya, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Vietnam, but also other countries like Vietnam, Fiji, and Guyana. I won't cite all the countries, but when I say we, it's of course Expertise France who coordinate the program, but our two key partners that implement the project onto the 16 countries are IUCN on 8 countries, in 8 countries, and the WWF France in 8 other countries. So our aim is to mainstream biodiversity in key sectors, and concretely, we have been providing with the government of these 16 countries with the means to first identify what are the main threats to biodiversity in their country, and secondly to animate, to facilitate a multi-stakeholder dialogue and to foster a sectoral voluntary commitment. So the main outcomes of the project is to foster these sectoral voluntary commitments that are based from science and that comes from a multi-stakeholders approach. So yeah, just to go a bit deeper into the methodology and what we have done during these 3 years. So the first step was the first assessment of threats to biodiversity, and this first step aimed at identifying 2 key sectors in the country that they wanted to work specifically and to mainstream biodiversity in these 2 economic sectors. So the first step, the first scientific assessment of main threats. The second step was a deep sectoral analysis of these 2 sectors. Who are the main actors? What are the practices that impact the biodiversity in these key sectors, and what are the best practices that are already implemented that can be replicated at the national levels. And then the third and last step is the multi-stakeholders dialogue that started from the beginning to identify the main threats and to all agree on the diagnosis until the end, which is the multi-stakeholders, the sectoral voluntary commitments. So these are the key steps. And when we talk about sectors, it's of course agriculture, of course forestry, fisheries, but all the countries went a bit deeper into the sector to identify some specific sectors like soya, corn, shrimp fisheries. So the goal, the aim was really to be efficient and to work at a scale in which we knew we would have some outcomes at the end of the project, and we knew that we would have some specific sectoral voluntary commitments at the end of the 3 years project. So yeah, just to say that we are now at the end of the project. We have been working on this for 3 years, and we are now learning some key lessons on what are the main factors if another country wants to mainstream biodiversity into its economic sectors. What can he do, and what steps should we follow, and what are the key factors that we've been identifying during these 3 years. So as we are now learning from these 3 years, we also focused on specific steps, and what Antonin will present us is the scientific assessment of main threats to biodiversity. What are the key elements of these main threats, and what have we learned during this 3 years project? So Antonin, I give you the floor to present us your study.
Thank you very much, Quentin. So I am Antonin Vergès. I'm working at IUCN in the Center for Economy and Finance. Is it this one? Yeah. Okay. And the chief economist and economics team. And I've been involved with my colleague Florence Curé, who is not there today, but who greatly contributed to this project, BioDev 2030, in the implementation in 8 of the 16 countries involved in BioDev. So on the IUCN side, and I think I'm going to cite them, the 16, because maybe you will recognize yourself and say, oh, okay, I know this one, and etc. So on the IUCN side, we've been working in West Africa, Benin, Guinea. Okay, with the map, even better. Benin, Guinea, Senegal, Burkina Faso. Central Africa, and I will cite the 16, not per operator. So Cameroon, Gabon, Congo, Eastern Africa, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Mozambique, Madagascar, and in Northern Africa, Tunisia. And as Quentin just said, we also had 3 non-African countries, so Guyana, Vietnam, and Fiji. So it's a 3 years long project that is ending its first phase. Fortunately, there will be a second phase that we are currently working on. And this is a moment for us to share some lessons that we think are useful for many actors, governments, NGOs, consultants, public development banks, etc. Our focus on the BioDev 2030 project is on economic sectors, and in the second phase of this event, we will focus on case studies, not only on economic sectors. So the 16 countries, the 3 ingredients of the BioDev. First, a scientific diagnosis. That's the first D. Second, multi-stakeholders dialogue. That's the second D. Third, the dissemination of our experiences and lessons. and this is, for example, today, what is happening now. We are trying to disseminate and share the traps to avoid, the good clues to proceed and conduct a scientific assessment of main threats, and this is what I'm going to focus on. The strategy, Quentin just showed it, of the BioDev 2030 project is to catalyze voluntary commitments by private actors at sectoral or territorial levels in each of the 16 pilot countries. So today, December 2022, in these countries, stakeholders are designing voluntary commitments in subsectors that appear in this slide. They have, on the basis of the scientific diagnosis of main threats, they have selected sectors and subsectors that, on that basis, were both key for the economic development of their country and key because they were deeply impacting biodiversity. So the agricultural sector, with many crops, cash crops, food crops, has been selected in each of the 16 countries. This is not a surprise, given the IP-based assessments, the global assessment showing that land use change and habitat degradation is one of the main drivers of biodiversity erosion. Mining sector has been selected by the stakeholders on the basis of the main threat assessments in 10 out of 16 countries. Fisheries in 5 countries, forestry sector, whether logging or wood harvesting for energy, in 5 countries, and livestock sector in 4 countries. So you can see that this is not only concentrated sectors with the key dominant actors and global value chains. We are also talking about sectors that at the national scale are being composed of many smallholders. We wanted to include them in this dynamic. So why and how did we arrive to this end? This is what I'm going to show you, and my objective today is that you download the publication that I will just show you, because we believe it will help you to save time if you want to replicate a similar approach. You will save 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, because these lessons we believe are useful not only for us to capitalize, but for other countries and other actors in other countries. That's what we hope, at least. So the process of the BioDev 2030 project, I think you got it. First, the scientific assessment of main threats, then the selection by the stakeholders of priority economic sectors and subsectors, in-depth analysis of these subsectors, and then the design of voluntary commitments. Identifying also enabling conditions, because the specificity of BioDev 2030 is that we are focusing on private sectors actors, but we do not forget that they need public policies, maybe, subsidies, trainings, enforcement of existing regulations, new regulations maybe. So we have also identified, they have identified enabling conditions that would facilitate the implementation of the voluntary commitments that they have designed and proposed. And this is an ongoing dynamic even today. So now I'm going to focus on the first step, and the lessons I will share very synthetically are related to the first step, the scientific assessment of main threats. So one such diagnosis has been conducted in each of the 16 countries. It was not one assessment for the 16 countries, but in each of the 16 countries, a team of scientific and technical experts has been hired, and they have worked on identifying and ranking main threats to biodiversity. They typically combined 3 methods that I will detail a little bit after that. It's been done on a rather quick fashion, but we believe it is still robust. 7 months, between 4 to 7 months to finalize the assessment, and it took a little bit more time that is absolutely needed to present, discuss, amend, and finally approve the results by the stakeholders. Stakeholders coming from different horizons, different levels, not only the government, not only the private sectors, not only the civil society, but all together, breaking silos and informing with a science-based approach, informing them about the likely impacts of production practices on biodiversity at national or landscape level. Now the assessments are being used, for example, to update the NBSAP or to design these voluntary commitments. In these sectors, agricultural, livestock, fisheries, ministry, forestry, and mining sectors. So we want to share the lessons. The likely users of the publication I'm going to show in one slide, because we believe these lessons are helpful for countries to implement the GBF and the long-term approach to mainstreaming. Likely users of this publication will be and of the lessons learned, government, public development banks, NGOs, consultants, private sector representatives. We have identified good practices, traps to avoid, and we have very synthetically organized the knowledge into such a way that another country or actors wanting to follow a similar approach could be able to follow steps, recommendations, and tools to go quickly and robustly establishing what are the main threats and link them to economic sectors. So please, I invite you to scan, download, go to this page, and later on, when you will have time, have a look. And if you do not have time, there is 2 pages at the end of the publication that wrap all up. This is the step-by-step approach associated with the recommendations that come from that we have derived from what happened in the 16 countries. And we propose tools that they have used and that for which we have better learned the strengths, the limitation, and their complementarities. So I invite you to download the publication and have a look at it whenever you will have time. So the 3 main methods that they have typically combined is a review of literature, whether global, published, gray literature, sometimes official reports, but also global data sources such as the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, the World Database on KBAs, key biodiversity areas, on the World Database on protected areas. They have used the IBAT tool. I don't know whether you know the IBAT tool. It is a platform where you can find a lot of data on your country, whether at the species level or at the ecosystem level. IBAT stands for Integrated Biodiversity Alliance Tool. They also use the IUCN Global Ecosystem Typology, etc. They have combined this review of literature and data sources with the STAR metric. STAR metric is S for species, T for threats, A for abatement, and R for restoration. Species, threats, abatement, and restoration. It gives you, it's a kind of thermometer. It gives you where your actions of abating threats or restoring habitats will have the higher impact on reducing species extinction risks. You can calculate scores. It's a quantitative metric. And you can map scores, total scores or scores per threats. So really useful. But said it like this, you could think, okay, it's a little bit far from the context, the national context. It's been designed elsewhere, the STAR metric. So what they did is that they have combined these 2 first methods with national experts interviews and elicitations. They have brought together many experts and they have tried to dip into the complexity of the threats, their scope, intensity, severity, and spatial distribution of the threats within their countries, and especially linking those threats to the economic sectors and sometimes specific production practices when possible. So the questions that are addressed in the publication are: what are the strengths, limitations, and synergies of each method that have been combined typically in each country? How was the STAR metric applied to different countries? What were the challenges in using it and in interpreting the results coming from the STAR metric? Did the methodologies converge or diverge, and where, in which country? And also what I was saying is that we wanted to allow other countries to rapidly understand how they could follow a similar approach if we manage to inspire them. So we have these 2 pages at the end synthesizing the step-by-step approach and associated recommendations and tools. I will not go into this, but this is an example of strengths, limitations, and complementarities of the 3 methods, because there is no silver bullet. If you use only one method, for example, you will focus on species and lose sight of ecosystem services. Sometimes you will have a qualitative assessment and you would like to have more quantitative assessment, what the STAR metric is bringing, for example. Sometimes you would like to reinforce the legitimacy in the eyes of stakeholders of your scientific assessment, and you need to involve national experts and expertise to combine and complement the results coming from the first 2 methods. So there is such a table in the document, and I will not go into the details. So examples, there are 12 recommendations in the document, but this is a selection of 9. I will not detail every one of them, but we encourage other actors and countries who would follow a similar approach to broaden the scope of biodiversity values, not only focusing on utilitarian values. In Benin, for example, sacred values have been considered and really included. It was really important to consider this. So choose a conceptual framework and ensure its application. We encourage to use the DPSIR framework and the classification of threats coming from IUCN CMP. You will find this on the web. The IUCN Red List of Threatened Species is really useful, and when a national red list exists, we encourage to use it, as well as the Red List Index, to have a sense of the trend in the country of what is happening to some taxa over time. We encourage parties to have a look and harness the full potential of the STAR metric. And one very important thing is to produce maps, different maps, STAR maps, but also maps showing the spatial distribution of economic sectors, and overlap these maps to better select areas where the actions of mainstreaming will deliver most impacts. Also, we encourage to involve national experts in the process to complement, and I've already talked about that. There are some tips also to handle tensions between science and stakeholders' interest. And at the moment of selecting subsectors, we recognize that there are that scientific criteria may not be the sole ones, so not the only ones. So there are other criteria to consider, and we list some of them, and we perfectly recognize that these could be considered to strengthen the robustness of the selection, because this has to last for several years after that, because this must be the ground to think and implement actions of mainstreaming. So the ground must be solid. So it must be scientifically credible and legitimate in the eyes of national stakeholders. Otherwise, it will not be a ground solid enough to build actions and implement them and make them last through time. So this is what I was talking about. This is my last slide. 12 recommendations that fit into 13 steps process and many tools that we recommend with tips to combine them efficiently. And we believe these will contribute to a solid and robust diagnosis, but also a diagnosis of main threats and linked to economic sectors that is recognized and approved by national stakeholders, which is a precondition to further work on these sectors and reconcile economic development and biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonin, for this study and these key messages on the scientific assessments of main threats to biodiversity. So now we wanted to take the advantage of COP15 to give the floor to stakeholders that have been experimenting this method, this process of mainstreaming, and we were really glad to have Mr. Melese, who is a national focal point of Ethiopia, and who is very busy as is the chairman of the working African Working Negotiation Group. So thank you very much, Mr. Melese, to take this 10 minutes to be with us and to showcase how this diagnosis of main threats to biodiversity helped you in your role, in playing your role as a CBD and national focal point. And as Antonin said, this study of main threats to biodiversity aims to be the ground of the building next action for mainstreaming for several years. So maybe you can tell us more about how do you see this assessment as your CBD national focal points point of view? Thank you, Mr. Melese.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, colleagues. And I thank you very much for the invitation in this forum. This method, especially we thank BioDev 2030 for capacitating us and supporting the Ethiopian Biodiversity Institute, especially that institute is a national focal point for the Ethiopian biodiversity. We have the office of BioDev 2030, and that is working together with us. So especially in the identification of the threats for biodiversity, a number of steps took place. As it was said, the consultants were hired, and they use the star matrix method as well as DPCR methods. The star matrix method is very important. However, still it is limited to the identification of traits in animals, not in plants. So that was highly commented. It's commented by many of the experts from universities, academia, research institutes, and others were involved. And even if the method is very important, yet it recognizes the larger animal types, not the smaller one. Therefore, there is a need for the improvement of the method. That is a comment given by the experts as a general. However, the method is very, very crucial and important. Not only, it is not a single method that we used. Many methods have been utilized with this regard. Review method of the literature, or the existing literatures were one of the important type. And another is expert, especially the expert views and reviews are very important, which we came across. And then in the presence of experts, and the most important aspect is that during the dialogue process, local community were included, and the people from the private sector involved, the government, non-government institutions were involved in the process. Therefore, such involvement really, it supported a lot. And then I can say that is a learning forum. So it capacitated others to learn each other also. So with this regard, at the end of the day, so we have selected like agriculture as one of the important traits. Cereal crop production is very, very important trait in my country. Secondly, the livestock, especially in the protected area in the national parks region, is also becoming serious. We do have the forest logging activity is also identified as one of the threat. And in southwestern part of the country, which is one of the hottest spots in the globe, in the world. Ethiopia has 2 hotspots among 36. So the Afro-Montane area where the coffee plantation is there, and it is also the origin of the coffee by itself, coffee Arabica. And then coffee plantation currently, because what the government doing is that the original forest land has been given for the investors so that they are making the monoculture to maximize their production. This was also important trait identified by this process. After the identification, the very important thing which just I observed it and I was excited is that we have selected 3 important areas. One is from the components, the Horn of Africa, the southeastern part of the country, which has the rainforest area, and the Bali Mountains, we call it the Bali Mountains, the rainforest area. Is greatly threatened by the livestock population, and at the same time cereal production. It's almost all cereal production area. Wheat and barley is being produced, and at the same time is a national park, so the community directly introduces the domestic animals into the national park system. That was identified as one of the important traits. Another location is that the Afro-Montane area, the southwestern part of the country where rich forests are there. The third was the Samen Mountains, the northern part, because of certain security problems. We didn't conduct on it, but we have conducted the research activities all together in both of it, the area. When the outcome of the research was presented for the community, really what I appreciate is that the knowledge of, rather than that of the investigators or the researchers, the knowledge of local people, which I really appreciated. Not only that, NGOs who have been working in this the forest area and the national parks, they do have really, they are extremely knowledgeable and they helped us. So in this process, what's very important is that just we came up with a real data and a real knowledge. And I myself, I'm a biologist, ecologist, and then I learned a lot really from the local people. You wonder really. I wonder for myself the knowledge that they do have. And also, lastly, at the end of the day, there have been a commitment for the local people how to save such biodiversity. So I have also a very important appreciation for the private sector, really. I appreciate it. They are extremely willingful. But the most important aspect is that even the government, people from the government sector, the authorities, okay, they would like to say that, oh, even if we have some enforcing laws, we are not capable of protecting or preventing such losses. You are saying the voluntary. So the voluntary commitment. Really does it works? They say it. They observe it as if a single option. No, we said for the implementation of post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and at the same time, a number of targets we have. And we have the national biodiversity strategy plan in our front. So among other methods, still we have, the most crucial is the voluntary commitment. Is not a single one. The observe it as if a single one is one of the important option, so that it introduces or the system invites the private sector, so that the private sector will be working together with the government. So with this regard, so at the end of the day, during the dialogue process, people came into knowledge and understand and having a good success with this regard. So from my view, me as the Director General of the Biodiversity, and also we are planning to have our the NBSAPs that will be revised. So this method is very, very important, BioDev 2030, in mainstreaming the important sectors for the biodiversity conservation. And this BioDev enabled us even to have a greater awareness. Oh, that is the case. This is a wonder with the results and outcomes, many of them. And then what I personally perceive is that because the loss of biodiversity is due to ignorance. One of the important is that. So this BioDev 2030 created a good platform for us, so that everybody could understand and aware of the laws and the threats that biodiversity has got. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Melese. I know you have a very busy agenda, so thank you for this time. What I just wanted to highlight in your intervention is the fact you learn from each other with local community, private sector, and the public actor, and these voluntary commitments permitted you to work along with the private sector and to build this together, and to have a greater awareness together with public, local community, and the private sector. So indeed, the next step will be to work on how NBSAPs can help the implementation of the voluntary commitments, and as Ethiopia will be part of phase 2 for BioDev, we will focus on this during the next year. So thank you, Mr. Melese. I now want to give the floor to our representative from the private sector, who comes from Mozambique. So, Luis, can you tell us how do you, from your perspective, from your point of view as a private sector, you get involved into the BioDev dialogue, and what are your expectations from this multi-stakeholders dialogue on biodiversity, and what are the next steps if you want to change your practices and the practices that can impact biodiversity? So I'll let you present yourself and you give us your feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I just also thank this opportunity. It's glad to stay here and share what some economic sectors in Mozambique are doing to reduce the loss of biodiversity. First, let me show you what's FENAGRI. FENAGRI, it's a national federation, which is a platform where there are more than 30 associations, small, medium, and big associations. Also, it's composed by big companies such as Mozambique Sugar Associations, Cotton Mozambique Associations, other one which is Cashew Association Processors, which is also a member of FENAGRE, and also a cotton association. So to get a minimal idea, the association which are working with sugar cane company. It's got 15,000 hectares, which they are producing cane. 4,000 hectares, it's belong to the associations producer of sugar. The tobacco one, it's got 100,000 auto growers, and this company got 4,000 workers. The cotton one, it got 142,000 of farmers growers, auto growers. So they got in the cotton 140,000 hectares. Okay, and FENAGRI is a member of Economic Association of Private Sector, which is leading the industry, nutrition, and agriculture's portfolio. We also working in partnership with the land and environment portfolio, which is belong to the CTA. I won't go through the methodology which they brought, but I will bring some results which we among the dialogue we had and with the community level and higher level. The results which we got in this dialogue is just to brought the role of state to create an environment that will encourage the implementation of the volunteer through the program and police and legal framework. Other roles is this civil private sector, which will incorporate biodiversity consideration in key project planning and management decisions. Other one, it's a financial institutions to develop set guidelines for environment sensitive sectors to ensure the financing of investment that respond to the voluntary commitment, work together with a mutual improvement performance and mitigate the damage through the engagement policy. Other one is to work with the NGOs and civil society. This will bring all people, research, and institutions, academic, to work together for this role. I just want to share with you what's happening in the land with these actors. I say that the sugar companies, it's got 15,000 of, and also I said 11,000 hectares, it belongs to the company, and 4,000 to the associations producers. In this, as you know, this sugar is being sold at Europe and America. Some low quantity are being sold in Mozambique and the big companies such as Coca-Cola. And also, when in this process of a dialogue, they will identify four sectors: agriculture, soybean, and sugar cane, extractive minerals, fisheries. But I will speak only in soybean and sugar cane, which is area we were working and we brought any information. The soybean is held in Zambezi province, which is produced by the big companies which had more than 30,000 hectares which they are producing. And also the association of soybeans, they got among 2,000 hectares where they are producing as a contractor with the big companies. In the sugar cane, what's happening in the place? In the clearing of the plant, the clearing the land, they use the legumes which got nitrogen to restore it in the soil and get the soil better. There is a rotation, there is a flow land and collage of pH, improvement of the soil. They use the producer in agriculture, but before 8 or 10 weeks before the harvesting, they don't put any agriculture for that. There is a analysis assessment of the soil, of the water regularly. The irrigation, they are immigrating to the irrigation from the gravity water, sprinkling irrigation to the drip water irrigation in order to reduce the water loss. In the pumping tubes are located in order to not harm the ecological tail. Also, there are control of pests and disease. The monitoring is through the natural controls. In the soya bean, some of the farmers are trained to produce homemade biological fertilizer prepared from the mix of dry and crushed papaya leaves, which ash. The soybean, they use non-till technologies. The use of salt in base of the result of soil tests, the precision of agriculture technology. The soil samples are taken from the replacement. No, sorry. The soil samples are taken from the representative soil types for analysis. The analysis determines in which the replacement, which nutrient should be carried out on it. The farmers use limited inputs such as herbicide, fertilizer, and the pesticide, and the rotation practice mix of the practice I mentioned before. Other things which is having there in the sugar company, in the harvest have a challenge in order to avoid the emission of the dioxide carbon for mitigate their planting. To mitigate it, they're planting trees and fruit trees. As I said, they got in this company 1,040 workers which are live around. So before that, they were using the wood and destroying the biodiversity, but the company now is mitigate to use gas stove and electrical stove. And other things is to, in the mechanization, they are using in the mechanization, they immigrating now to harvesting in the manual for the mechanization one. They also use they are mitigating in the use the diesel tractors to the electrical one. And also per week, they got awareness to the workers on how to use a good practice on their lands. Also, there is a deep research in order to use a cane sugar vertical production instead of the horizontal one. And the challenge, what we need in the challenges is to still collaborate, multi-sector collaborate stakeholder with the government and other actors. Also, our platform is the national platform which we use it to have a public dialogue with the government to brought all stakeholders in this. Okay, it still needs the research to be done, training, capacity building, at this situation, subsidy, investment, to change also experience among the country which are involved in this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, for this testimony on biological fertilizer, natural controls, and how the need for sharing these good experiences if we want to scale up the good practices that are already implemented on the ground. So thank you for your testimony. I will now give the floor to someone who will be the transition between this first part on the multi-stakeholders dialogue and the scientific assessment, and the second part, which is more on the inclusive governance. So I will give the floor to Jorge Picado, who is a biological expert and who coordinates the activities of the post-2020 Euro EU program in Costa Rica, and who has worked on a data collecting method that rely on multi-stakeholders, people, on public, private, and local communities to collect all these data that are needed for the assessment of threats to biodiversity. So, Jorge, if you hear us, we give you the floor now.
Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, Jorge, for this feedback. And I don't know if we can ask the panelists for the next part to come. So, Business for Nature, ICLEI, WWF International, the youth, Costa Rican national focal points, and all the speakers that have been invited to this segment, please feel free to come on the stage. And now, Hugo, I give you the floor for the second segment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Quentin, and welcome everyone. So I'm Hugo Rivera. I represent the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework EU Support Project, and we'll be having a second segment that is interlinked with the first one on the importance of inclusive governance and stakeholder engagement for the co-creation of measures to implement mainstreaming effectively in the new framework. For that, we have a PowerPoint presentation, so if our dear technicians can present it. I want to thank our distinguished guests today. We appreciate it that you're here on such an important date for negotiations. In the meantime, I will introduce them. So we have Eugenio Arguedas, the national focal point of Costa Rica to the CBD. Thank you for being here. Victor Alvarado, a consultant working with us from Mexico, who is supporting the work that we do together with ECLAC, with the Economic Commission in Latin America. We have Michael here, Fosugene Vice. I'm always unsure how to pronounce your name, I'm sorry. From Business for Nature, thank you. Gavin Edwards, the director for the Nature Positive Initiative from WWF International. Dear friend, another dear friend, Ingrid, from ICLE. Nicolas, I can hear you. Sorry, Nicolas, we all can hear you. Paul Dale, advisor for biodiversity and environment at the state of Sao Paulo. Thank you for being here. Next slide, please. So our project, at the beginning of our project, we thought about what does it mean to be transformative. So we took a look at IPES reports, some results from research, and we identified the stakeholder engagement as one of the most important issues that we wanted to focus on. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes, so we'll show you a short video of the project to introduce what we do.
Biodiversity supports all life on Earth. It provides us with the oxygen, water, food, medicines, energy, and health we all need. It's also the foundation of our economies. It provides jobs and leisure activities while contributing to our well-being. Yet our planet is facing unprecedented environmental crises. Climate change, urbanization, overexploitation of resources, unsustainable agriculture, fishery and consumption practices, as well as lands and soils degradation, contribute to biodiversity's alarming decline. The scale of the challenges is too large for any country, sector, organization, or initiative to tackle alone. Conservation and restoration efforts need to be scaled up, and biodiversity has to be used responsibly, internationally, and in all countries. Our project, funded by the European Union and implemented by Expertise France, works with researchers, policymakers, business, finance, and civil society to implement an ambitious global biodiversity framework. Our mission is to inform, inspire, mobilize, and enable the whole of society to take transformative actions for nature and people. We support global mobilization by sharing knowledge, best practices, and expertise to offer solutions for environmental issues. We work in 10 countries, but also internationally, to foster transformative change on the ground and strengthen biodiversity policy globally. Our project focuses on mainstreaming biodiversity in public policy, engaging all stakeholders, ensuring transition of agri-food systems, strengthening the visibility of green cities and their contributions to biodiversity, promoting ecosystem restoration and the sustainable use of genetic resources, fostering landscape and seascape approaches. Only coordinated efforts among all key actors, from national to local governments, international organizations, civil society, and private sector, can reshape our relationship with nature.
Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. So as time is running, I will give the floor to our first panelist. So what we want to do today is showcase how our project has been aiming at doing exactly that, bringing together all stakeholders, government, non-governmental stakeholders, in order to to enable mainstreaming of biodiversity and making it real and giving it life. So the question for you is, Gavin, what were your experiences with the process that led to the creation of the Marseille post-2020 pavilion and all the amazing work that you've been doing after that? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Hugo. Thanks everybody today. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the ongoing support from Expertise France and the EU for the work of WWF in working amongst non-state actors and civil society as well. To your question, there has been a movement that has been growing for some time now around nature, but it's really started to pick up in the last years. If I would have been here 3 or 4 years ago, we wouldn't have had a Business for Nature organization even at a place like the Convention on Biological Diversity. So I want to try and pinpoint a couple of moments and a couple of kind of points where it's actually been growing from something which is disparate and a set of voices to something that is becoming more and more united. And that, as you say, Hugo, is the World Conservation Congress at IUCN in Marseille. I happened to be at the previous IUCN Congress 5 years before that in Hawaii, and there was some movement there, but it was a lot of conservationists, people that you would expect to be working in WWF and elsewhere, and governments, but we didn't really see that movement. By the time we got to Marseille, thanks to a lot of workshops, webinars, a lot of organizing and mobilizing, we started to see a couple of things. We started to see a real broadening of the movement. We started to see many different kinds of organizations come together. For example, 112 organizations at that point signed up to a big call to action, which faced the global biodiversity framework that is being negotiated today, with some ambition inside it. Ambition for nature, the idea of a nature-positive world, but also for rights-based approaches and many other things in that call to action as well. I think that was an important moment, but it doesn't really stop there, because as well as that broadening of the movement, we've started to see a deepening of the movement as well. For example, just here, if we fast forward here to Montreal, some of the statements and commitments we've seen in the last few days are really quite impressive. We've seen the faith community, faith organizations from around the world, again, caring for nature and how that overlaps with different faiths and different beliefs and spiritual values around the world. And 55 organizations not only expressed their care, but started to talk in real policy terms about what the Global Biodiversity Framework should have as its key ingredients as well. The same for humanitarian and development organizations, and indigenous peoples groups have just signed up to their own call for action and some key ideas that need to be in the Global Biodiversity Framework as well. We heard more than 400 universities just a few days ago create a nature positive universities network to ensure that their impact and their footprint as universities can be lowered and can be moved in a positive direction as well. So this movement is growing, it is being seeded well, and the question now is, where does it go next? I think the BioDev discussion that we had earlier in the presentations give us a hint at that. A lot of the movement now that's been growing is really about ensuring a strong multilateral outcome here in Montreal. A biodiversity framework that recovers nature, reverses nature loss, doesn't just halt nature loss. A biodiversity framework for a nature-positive world, for rights-based approaches to 30 by 30, for nature-based solutions, for tackling the footprint and drivers of nature loss as well. But that movement that has grown also needs to play a role in implementation. And what we heard from the BioDev work there is working at a national level, how that can be accomplished by looking at different sectors nationally to work on sectoral plans and in order to implement what we hope will be some true ambition coming out of Montreal here as well. So that's a little bit the evolution of the movement. It's very global in nature now, and I think the next big step here, how nationally is this going to be reflected so that the Global Biodiversity Framework does not make the mistake of the Aichi targets and being slow to start with its implementation and not achieving its goals, but instead we take a little bit of a break after this. Some of us have been here quite a while, many of us I think. Instead we just go straight into implementation in January with many more parts of society than we've possibly seen in the last decade. This is the only way to achieve net zero, a nature positive, and a more equitable world for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin. And of course, thank you, Gavin. And you were mentioning the national, and the subnational is also very important. We will have a little bit of a change in program now, because some of our guests need to go to the negotiations. They are very active in that realm. So I'm gonna give the word to Ingrid to reflect on how subnational governments and local governments have been achieving the amazing results here at COP, and the way forward to do that. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much. And I want to just start off by recognizing the very generous support from the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework EU support project, without which we would not have managed the level of mobilization that we have at this summit and at this COP of subnational governments and cities. We've had mayors and governors from more than 69 countries represented here. But it hasn't just been at this COP and our 7th summit. It's also been in the whole process leading up, which we started soon after the 2018 COP. So from 2019 already, we've had meetings and events and things. And I think that, I want to highlight just a few things. There's been so much that's happened. So we had dialogues in many countries involving all levels of government, including Canada, my own country, South Africa, China, Brazil. In Brazil, we also had a dialogue with the business sector. There were several other events in Brazil, but my dear friend Paul Dale will hopefully touch on that. But also in Mexico and Peru, Colombia. And besides that, we were able to, through the Edinburgh process, which the good thing that COVID did for us when we weren't able to meet in person and we had to meet online was it opened up the consultation with our constituency to a whole lot more people. And through the Edinburgh process and the support that we had from this project, we were able to reach more than 400 of our constituency, which is quite a major achievement. And I think the other thing that we should recognize is that the outcome of the Edinburgh process, which is the Edinburgh Declaration, and we've had more than 300 signatories to that declaration, is that it gave rise to a call for a renewed decision. And I'm extremely happy as I sit here and also very excited because that the conference room paper on that renewed decision and plan of action, which picks up off where the previous decision ended, is being considered this evening in the negotiations. And something else that I think is just absolutely amazing is that this momentum has lasted, although our project ended a while ago. This momentum has lasted, and in fact, it's built up. It's got even stronger. And this morning in the high-level segment, for the first time, we had 2 representatives from our major group, and it's the only major group that had 2 representatives presenting on the outcomes of the summit for cities and subnational governments. But there's been a whole lot more. Some of the other outputs was Cities with Nature, where we developed an action platform. We're very, very proud of our action platform. In the audience, we have Stefania Romano, who's the coordinator for Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature. And she's done a lot of work in terms of recruiting more cities. That was something else that came as a result of this project. And we had, I think in the past 2 or 3 weeks, something like 35 to 40 new cities and regions and major new partners, WHO, and the Convention on Migratory Species joining up. And we launched this when we last saw each other in person, Hugo, in Geneva. We launched this platform, and we already, in this short time, have almost 200 commitments from subnational governments on that action platform. We had a very big social media campaign, Twitter campaigns, there were newsletters, there were 4-pager documents, one on the Edinburgh process, one on something that's extremely important. And those of you that have been following the negotiations have followed the discussion around resource mobilization and financing. We had a paper on that. And yeah, I mean, I can carry on and on. And we really hope that in future we can continue this partnership, because we need this type of support for our cities, for our subnational governments, and for the networks. The work that ICLEI does and the work that Regions 4 does, we really need this type of support. So we're hopeful that we're going to get a new partnership off the ground. Unfortunately, I have to leave. We're meeting, we have some bilateral meetings, and this evening I hope to see everybody in the negotiation rooms. But I just want to mention that I leave you in Stefania's very able and capable hands, and I'm going to ask her to take my seat now as I leave. And thank you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. We appreciate that you took the time to be with us today. So now we're going from the subnational level to the national level, and we have another person who really honors us today with her presence and who really took the time to be here from Costa Rica, the national focal point, Eugenia Arguedas Montezuma. Costa Rica has been an ally. Costa Rica has been an ally and one of the countries where we have had, I hope, the most impact. And so I'm very curious to hear Eugenia refer to what we have been working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo, and nice to be here. And thank you for this invitation to share with you in this panel. Well, I would like to talk or share some information with you about one program that we have called Costa Rica Man Natura. In 2020, we start a process called Costa Rica Man Natura. This process goals was to consult the different sectors about the biodiversity framework. And we were expecting to develop a workshop in a presential format. I mean, person workshop. But in March 2020, we totally switched our plans because, as you had know, the pandemic not allowed any kind of presential workshops. And so we switched our plans to a virtual format, always under the context of the Costa Rica Man Natura. So we started in a virtual format, and that was a big challenge. But against we expect, the visual format allow us to share with many scientists. And we share with many scientists the elements of the framework that was more, that need a lot of information or different information than the political. Beyond this political information, we needed in that moment more scientific information. So that was amazing. For instance, to see the private sector of Costa Rica sharing an information when one of the most famous scientists for transformative change approach was very amazing. And I think that the private sector, in that moment, the private sector was able to take or to recommend it to us approaches, wisest approaches, because they already know what a transformative change means. So now, almost 4 years after the pandemic, before we came here, we take into account the consultations that we did in Costa Rica Man Natura in 2020. And Costa Rica Man Natura facilitate considerably our 2022 consultations. Despite we were moving forward in negotiations in CBD, When we came again to stakeholders to ask about the post-2020, they were more prepared about the different topics. So Costa Rica Natura was a very important process that allow us to build a Costa Rica position in front of the post-2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugenia. And what we hear here is different actors, and the process is always the same. Having a more informed position, a more informed construction, co-creation of the points that different countries, different constituencies, different groups want to bring here to the negotiation tables. We have now our two youth representatives present. I will let them present themselves. We had in the project, we had two similar processes. One was a global one. So we supported the Global Youth Biodiversity Network in the construction of their position that led to the Youth Manifesto and their position to the CBD negotiations related to the GBF. But on the other hand, we also worked at the national level and a lot in South Africa, another very big ally of our project. So today, I wanted to ask you if you could present a little bit what was done with youth together with in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I am Kelezo Malepe. I am the national. Okay, thank you. I'm the national chapter coordinator to the South African Youth Biodiversity Network. So our network is a national chapter of the Global Biodiversity Network, and is also registered as a non-profit organization in South Africa. It was created on the 6th of September in 2017 after the Gibbon Africa Capacity Building Workshop, which was hosted in South Africa in support of the South African government Department of Environmental Affairs. Ever since our establishment in 2017, we were recognized as a key stakeholder, youth stakeholder by our government, with support from our CBD focal point, Mama Kwatekana, who's been very supportive of youth voices in policy advocacy work, and also very encouraging and participating in our capacity building workshops. So we focus mainly on capacity building and biodiversity policy advocacy. And the main reason behind that is because when we attended the Gibbon Africa Capacity Building Workshop, we realized that in South Africa, we do not have a platform where South African young people are able to come together and learn about the biodiversity, the CBD convention, and also learn from each other and share their own experiences, and also be able to influence biodiversity decision-making processes. Ever since our establishment in 2019, when the discussion paper was released by the co-chairs of the post-2020 GBF, we engaged with the paper and decided that we want to run youth consultations across South Africa so that we can share the knowledge and also get the youth perspective on the post-2020 GBF and see how we can also write a position paper that we can provide to our national government and also to the global biodiversity framework. And it all started off as just an idea. We're a very small youth network with little to no funding. We wrote a concept note that we shared with our CBD focal point. And through their support, we were able to run youth consultations in 6 provinces out of 9 provinces across South Africa. And this was all done in partnerships with different stakeholders in South Africa, so state actors and also non-state actors. We engage with youth organizations and also NGOs. And it was through their partnership really that we were able to even host the stakeholder consultations to begin with. And the main outcome of the stakeholder consultation was a position paper that we submitted to the Gibbon in order for it to be incorporated into Gibbon's position paper, and also to our South African CBD focal point. After our national consultation, the former chapter coordinator to Sabin who is Smangele Msweli, was invited to be part of a youth leadership dialogue, which was a partnership between Expertise France, UNESCO, and Gibbon. And this was a dialogue where they brought young people from different parts of the world to be able to just share their views and perspective on the post-2020 GBF. And it was through this dialogue that we realized that we also need to host a similar dialogue in Africa so that we can have African youth coming together to share their own experiences and their own perspective on the post-2020 GBF. And we can have an African youth position paper that we can share with our different stakeholders. And so Sabin was able to organize an African Youth Biodiversity Forum with the support of Expertise France. And this was hosted at the Vembe Biosphere Reserve. And they are one of our biggest supporting implementing organizations in South Africa. And it was through this that we were able to bring about 43 young people from 19 African countries together in South Africa. And some were from the Men and Biosphere youth representatives, some were representing different NGOs and youth networks, and some were also from Gibbon Africa chapters. And one of the main outcome of this was a youth declaration, which we shared with Expertise France and also with our different stakeholders. Specifically in South Africa, we shared it with our CBD focal point and our government, and also some of the youth networks and organizations that were present at the forum. And post the consultations, or the African Youth Biodiversity Forum, that's when COVID hit and we could not host any more in-person consultations. But Expertise France was still very much in support of young people being able to host consultations, young people being able to engage with one another on the post-2020 GBF, especially because in the first consultation, it was on the draft of the post-2020 GBF. And when the updated zero draft was released, we felt that we need to even have a consultation on that one, because there were more elements that were added that we did not even engage with in the first consultations that we ran. And so Expertise France helped us in terms of running a virtual consultation meetings with South African youth again. And also our government CBD focal point was very in support of this, and she was able to do most of the capacity buildings with the young people who attended the consultation. And we provided a similar outcome with this one, where we wrote a position paper yet again, and we shared it with the different stakeholders like our government and also the Gibbon, which also got incorporated into Gibbon's position paper. And I think for us, what stood out from the consultations was just the need for partnerships, not just amongst youth networks, but also amongst state actors, funders, and also NGOs. And we were grateful for the fact that Expertise France saw young people as important stakeholders and having youth voices being represented in biodiversity policy advocacy work. And it was through the different partnerships that we're able to engage with that we're even able to host the consultations. I don't think we would have been able to run as much consultations as we did had it not been for the partnerships and had it not been for the different state actors and non-state actors recognizing the importance of youth inclusivity in decision making, and also recognizing that young people also want to be engaged and they have a lot to say, and they have things that not only are they learning at school, but they're also learning through their own projects that they're running on the ground. And one of the outcomes that is also like we're going to be taking forward is we realized that as youth networks and also other NGOs, we have similar shared interests. And so we don't want to just be involved in the consultations or in the biodiversity policy advocacy. We also want to engage in the implementation of the post-2020 GBF. So moving forward, post-COP15, we will also be engaging in grassroots project with other networks or other NGOs, such as the Vembe Biosphere Reserve, which does amazing work in one of the biggest biosphere in South Africa. And so we're looking at how we can partner with them on grassroots project and also conduct consultations on the updated NBSAPs that will be taking place post-COP15. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Osi, anything you want to add?
Thank you for that, Ugo. My name is Osi. I'm part of SAYPN from South Africa. I'm part of the South African delegation. I just want to mention, in terms of inclusive governance, what is inclusive governance? Inclusive governance is making sure that all members of society are actually involved within the process and the making of policies, making sure that there's you take into account the gender and all facets of personal identity. So when institutions, policies, processes, and services are accessible to the people, then that's when you know that you have a successful inclusive governance. So we're facing a lot of environmental challenges today because governance systems are not taking into account society, but only benefiting a few of those in power. So you find that the bulk of the populations, specifically even in African countries, are left poor. They're impoverished because they don't have access to those resources. So you'll find that they end up over exploiting the natural resources, and you find that they are being excluded from their land. So you find that the productive land is actually taken from them, and when it's taken from them, it's only benefiting top industries, and that's why you'll find that with a lot of people, they are very reluctant towards the 30 by 30, because you'll find that in some of the areas, let's say fishing communities, you find that it's been declared a marine protected area without sufficient public participation. So you find that they've been fishing there for decades. Now they're being excluded from that area to fish there. So you find that subsistence fishers are actually being disadvantaged by it. So part of inclusive governance is actually ensuring that when you're declaring an area a protected area, you actually include the people within the process and know that how will they be affected by that decision making. So the exclusion of those community members from access to resources, and for instance, it excludes them from healthcare services, housing, water, electricity. So you find that it causes a chain effect towards all facets of society when you're excluding them from the decision making. And you find that it's associated with environmental problems of land degradation, unprecedented loss of biodiversity, species extinction. So you find that in the environmental challenges, there's ways that we can address it with regards to inclusive governance, and that is by three ways. Inclusive governance that will ensure consideration of all facets of personal identity within the processes, addressing gender equality within those processes, and improving access to resources and services, and most importantly, meaningful engagement of youth in the decision making. And I'd like to take note, and I'd like to thank Expertise France by contributing to sponsoring some of the youth that are attending the COP15. We really love the fact that you are including youth within these engagements, and thank you for making this possible for us. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Osi, for your words. And it's on the contrary. It's an honor for us to give you the space and the voice to say what's important, also related to implementation. So that brings me to our next guests, which is Michael, the private sector. So with Business for Nature, our collaboration has been a little bit more indirect, but nevertheless, they have been a very, very important partner and ally in this race towards this conference. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Hugo. And I think I'd like to begin by saying thanks to the post-2020 framework EU support for all the great work that you've been doing, and creating these conversations, creating these platforms for different parts of society to get together to discuss these very critical intersections of dealing with climate, nature, and inequality. I think just reflecting, before I actually reflect, my name is Michael Ofosuhindo Wise. I'm with Business for Nature. And just to provide some context, Business for Nature is a global coalition of business and conservation organizations that are working together with progressive and leading businesses to advocate for ambitious nature policy and action. And just to take a step back and reflect on the past 2 weeks, we've been here discussing how we're going to reach a global agreement to tackle this issue of nature loss. And I think one theme is emerging quite strongly is that it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a whole of society approach. We need to come together as governments, as business, as civil society, as youth, as NGOs to tackle this issue together. Which is why I think this is quite an important topic that we're trying to discuss. How inclusive do we make these approaches? From a business perspective and working with leading companies, we have seen a very strong shift in momentum coming into this COP. We started, when we started Business for Nature in 2019, we put out a call to action, which very rapidly mobilized companies generally to call on governments to set ambitious action on nature. If you look on your seat, you see that we, together with Expertise France, we've developed some of the early conversations of trying to get business on board this agenda, which is no business on a dead planet, and trying to create the economic case for business action on nature. And that was a good piece of work that really started the conversations to unlock business engagement in this piece of work. And I think since then, we have seen that nature is gradually rising on the business agenda. There's so much momentum building. Coming into COP, we have over 300, and right now 390 companies calling on governments to make it mandatory for them to disclose their impact and dependencies. These are companies from over 56 countries with a combined revenue of almost 1.5 trillion. And that's quite unprecedented to see that level of momentum coming from the private sector to ask for governments to regulate them. So in the spirit of what we're trying to do here, and just building off what Gavin was also saying, I think it's quite difficult to come after these three stakeholders because, like you said, it's different stakeholders, but the elements of inclusiveness is quite similar. So I'll just build on that and say we need to take it to the next step. Right now, we're working on rallying behind this global goal for nature to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. We are seeing that momentum, that whole society coming behind this rallying goal. And I think, like many of my colleagues have said, the next step is how do we make sure that this is trickling down, this is being mainstreamed into the economy. And I think one key thing that we need to address in making this a reality is making sure that we're clear. We're not necessarily to simplify, but to clarify exactly what each stakeholder needs to do. We need to be able to work together to clarify how do we each contribute to this nature positive future, which is essentially translating into halting and reversing nature laws by 2030. The second piece that I wanted to highlight is around working at the national level in the form of MBSAPs. Just yesterday, Business for Nature also announced a piece of work that we're going to be doing collectively with the Global Environment Facility, where we've identified some key countries to work with them on the national level to have these conversations between governments, between businesses, around how we can mainstream biodiversity action and implement the post-2020 framework in those countries. The last thing that I wanted to highlight through this multi-stakeholder collaboration and the inclusiveness is the need for us to encourage sharing of concrete actions, demonstrating that evidence of action, because we know that action begets action. The more action we take, the more we're able to share. And I see on that banner over there that one of the key ethos, the approach that the post-2020 framework takes is this knowledge sharing. Right? We always talk about lack of data, lack of examples. We need to encourage all of these actions that are, taken to be shared between stakeholders for us to actually understand how we can work collaboratively. And then the last piece that I would highlight before I go is around the issue of accountability. I think at the core of this is that we need action on the ground. We've heard that we need to make commitments. We have the signal for global goal. We're working with different stakeholders, particularly from the business community, to set concrete science-based targets. But I think to make all of this work, we need to also hold each other accountable. And that is where I think all the work that is happening for mandatory disclosure and all of these key things will be critical. In conclusion, I think what is clear is that the greatest risk for us right now is the risk of inaction, the risk of not doing anything. And I hope that collaboratively, we as a whole society, as different stakeholders, can really come together to make it work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And for me, the beauty of this COP has been not only the business sector being so active here, but also many stakeholders, including youth, including subnational governments, including local communities, mentioning and stressing out the importance to include the private sector in their deliberations. So it's been both ways, and I think that's what we need to hear. And talking about the economy, we have another guest, Victor Alvarado, a consultant from Mexico who has been helping us in the work we've been doing with ECLAC, with Economic Commission in Latin America. Victor, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Hugo. Thank you very much to everyone. Well, I will share with you the experience that we have gone through in ECLAC, a process that started back way to December. It was, December 2019, after COP14 in Egypt, where the parties decided to invite and convene the United Nations agency to actively engage and contribute to the process of the developing the post-2020 GBF, and also to start working on identifying ways to implement or support the immediate implementation of the goals that we are now negotiating here in Montreal. So Latin America and the Caribbean region has a lot of experiences on developing biodiversity and environmental governance within the last decades, but it also has some examples of setbacks and of lack of harmonization and coherence within institutions and different sectors at different levels of government. So that in that way, in 2019, ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, with the support of Expertise France, developed or convened a regional dialogue in Santiago. It was held in Santiago, gathering high-level experts from biodiversity knowledge and management institutions, that is governmental, including negotiators and academic, and from institutions with a regional and global perspective. That dialogue was convened to share their experience, ambitions, as how to contribute to the development of the post-2020 GBF. And the three main items were or result from the discussions. First is how important is the knowledge as a strategic resource to build a strategy and strengthen bridging institutions for biodiversity. And that means to construct and to strengthen hubs of expertise and interfaces for biodiversity management and policies, and also includes ways to how to help and strengthen these institutions by increasing their legitimacy. The other thing that was also identified on that workshops were how biodiversity mainstreaming and multi-level institutional cooperation and coordination is key for the region, as biodiversity needs a strong and sustained institutional, social, and political support for it not to be eluded, and also the importance of bridging institutions for biodiversity. Also, the experts identified at that workshop how biodiversity actors can lack the capacity to understand sectoral dynamics and discussions, and similarly, how sectoral actors often lack knowledge and concern about biodiversity issues. And that started a discussion that actually led to, well, with the third topic that was identified, that how biodiversity is also, there's a need to recognize it as a social environmental issue for our region. That led to a second phase of that collaboration with Expertise France. And in 2021, those same high-level experts helped ECLAC to identify actions to help the region and the countries on the negotiations of the post-2020 GBF. And there was the lack of neutral spaces of dialogue and to share points of view was identified as a way to go. And ECLAC convened with the support again of Expertise France, convened two multi-stakeholder dialogues, and that was also done with WWF and a hub of experts. And this was done in August of 2021, and several recommendations were obtained from that dialogue concerned to mainly the financial goals and targets, and also the how to mainstream biodiversity within the economic and social sectors within the region. So now we are starting a third phase, well, let's call it a third phase maybe, that will just had two products actually that were presented a couple of days ago in a side event here about studies on biodiversity mainstreaming and innovative governance for transformative change. That was also presented in a simultaneous event with BioDev platform. And there's also a common group of the regional economic commissions that has led to a statement and engagement strategy of these 5 economic organisms of the United Nations that has led to identify where and how can those economic commissions provide an added value on the implementation of the post-2020 GBF. And this year, this 2023, we are going to start another project on the mainstreaming of biodiversity within economic sectors, and also to convene dialogues, to develop tools for sectoral implementation of strategies within the Latin America and the Caribbean. And we look forward to start this work with and continue the work with Expertise France. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. And just let me stress out that it's not only Expertise France, so it's the European Union.
European Union as well,
that
yes.
gives
Thank
us
you.
the important funds that we need to do this work. We have a last speaker, and then we have some words from the Commission, the European Commission. But now it's over to you, Paul, to tell us a little bit what we have done in Brazil together, which I think personally was a great success. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this amazing support from the EU and Expertise France, also from all these activities that we have done together, and here represented by Hugo, but with an amazing team. And we have a lot of partners, very important also, most of them here, like ECLAC Victor there, and ICLEI Stefania here, and before Ingrid, and ICLEI South America, Marilia, Rodrigo was here, but I think no, but Advisory Committee on National Government Regions 4 goes coordinated by Haiti, Edinburgh Process Partners by Scotland, the Working Group on Bioeconomy from Madrid, now the Task Force on Subnational Governments for the HAC on the 3030. So what I'm trying to say that we are trying to work together, and we are trying to work together on our constituency, so local governments and subnational government. But like all of the people, the amazing people talking here at the stage have talked, this is important to work together, but not only in our sector. So we've a way to cross this. And this is what we try to be with your support on June in Sao Paulo and in the hybrid event, but to be transformative. This is your challenge that you're always trying to press us to do, and we have more time to boot, but not so much. So we have only 8 years to reach 2030. So it's not so much time. So and Michael also the well reinforcing this action together. So, but we must cross the sectors. We must work together and among us. So, and maybe we try to do this on this while this World Bio process on June in São Paulo with this amazing support also from GIZ, from the German government, but the main support came from São Paulo state also, but from the Expertise France and the European Union, but to select priorities. So we will have this map approved on the next day. So they are the sources of the priorities, and then we must try to monitor, and this is important, how to connect with the previous session here on science. Science is the way to select the best priorities and the best indicators, and that's the best way to monitor this. And we have 8 years, so we have to do this in a short time. So, and in a way to define ways to find new ways if necessary, and to repeat this cycle during this time. So we won't have the capacity to be transformative if we do only twice this time. So I think we must do this more often and trying to repeat the cycle. So what is this so important? To join forces on these indicators, to join forces on these ways to do, and to join forces on the communication. And linking with that international cooperation raised here by all of you. And we decided to start this idea on the World Bio event that we are trying to offer, and maybe Clay and others we are trying to invite to work on that. São Paulo is offering, and we promote this with the Secretariat itself from the convention, this event on the World Bio, and we are trying to repeat this starting the next year. Ingrid asked us to decide this, so for the next year, every 2 years, having the year that are not having the COP, and trying to monitor and to define new ways to work on that. But it would be very important to work on different sectors, different major groups that we have on the convention, and this is the invitation. And the main question raised by you some days ago, Didier and Hugo, what is happening with the results? And the same question was raised at the ending, the closure session of the Finance Day. So how can we connect this? Michael told us that a large amount of companies are doing this, but how, Ingrid told us, the youth here, so IPLC, how to connect this with the negotiations of the party. So this is the main question. And just to conclude, we had these 5 lines on this World Bio, try to select the priorities, but it's not, it's just a selection to discuss. And one of them is on bioeconomy, green economy and blue economy. The other of them, it's the second line, it's on science. I won't give, no, we don't have time to discuss the other 3, but this made us to connect with Madrid community in Spain, and to organize a working group that everybody's invited, CBEDs accepted, CAF, the Latin American Development Bank accepted. So nature, business for nature, we could talk later, but it would be very nice. Natura, some companies are trying to connect with us, but IPLC and different partners and different actors, but something that we made with ECLAC, with Victor, and we are trying to reinforce the idea of live territories, of sustainable territories. So a city can be sustainable, a state, a province, a canton, so can be a sustainable territory, but biosphere reserves, protected areas, IPLC territory. So we can work together on this concept and trying to link with the parties, and then the parties can be also sustainable territories, and then we can achieve this challenge. So as Ingrid, we have a lot to talk, but we'll conclude right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, as always, giving us the right things to do. So you see this as a project. The conversation has shifted from how do we bring different actors together and rely on their expertise, their experiences, their capacity to bring the conversation forward and be concrete and transformative, towards the GBF text, to now how can we do similar exercises for implementation? We need to sit down and we need to talk to everyone, include every single group of actors, and have a common vision of how we are going to implement this framework at the local level, at the national level, at the subnational level, including everyone. So this wouldn't be possible where you know that our project is in a second phase. And for us, it was a little bit difficult because we were planning to have 1 year dedicated to facilitating implementation after the COP. You know that the COP was postponed. So it was very important for us that we had the opportunity to have a second phase where the European Commission was gracious to give us the opportunity to continue this great work. So for the final words, I'm inviting to the stage Thierry Dudermel, our counterpart, team leader for biodiversity at DG International Partnerships.
Thank you, Hugo. And thank you for all the participants. I mean, that I'm very impressed by the quality of the intervention, the commitment of all the stakeholders, all the actors. And we seeing through that how this mobilization of all the sectors, all the types of actors is a necessary condition for the movement towards, I would say, living in harmony with nature. No? And of course, the EU is very committed, and we are actively involved also. You know that in the negotiation of the COP towards a global biodiversity framework. But as it was just mentioned, this will only happen if all the players, all the sectors of the society, all the institutions are part in this process. And that we have this connection between, let's say, the official or the political and policy side and the implementation of this framework. So now we have a big challenge ahead of us. We do hope that the ambitious global biodiversity framework will be adopted these days, and then the involvement of all sector is absolutely necessary. So from the non-governmental sector, and I think it was very important also to bring this nature positive agenda, a new narrative on nature, and without the civil society and it would not have happened. But of course, all the other players, of course, youth and the future, I mean, representative of the future generation also, and the indigenous people and local community who are so much connected with nature and biodiversity have an important role, and local authorities, and of course the private sector in whole is its diversity in dimensions. So thank you very much again. I'm very, I take away from this conversation that there is really a momentum building on together with the Global Biodiversity Framework. And as EU, we are very committed to continuing this process and support all these initiatives. Thanks also to this partnership with Expertise France. Thank you very much. And I would like really to congratulate all of you for your initiative and encourage you to take new energy, new momentum of what is coming ahead of us and to achieve successful implementation of the GBF. Thank you very much.
So with that, we come to the final words for our event. We're over time, but if someone has a question, we can perhaps take 5 minutes to answer a question. Yes.
Mine is not a question, but to say thank you very much and say Uganda, as one of the participating countries, we also did similar work on the key drivers to biodiversity loss. And I am from the sector, one of the sectors that was chosen, that is the energy sector, as a sector that is a key driver to biodiversity loss. We have made our commitments, but we don't want these commitments to stay there. So we really call upon BioDev. I know my colleague here who is from NEMA clearly indicates that we have a follow-up project. But for me, my emphasis is we need to ensure that these biodiversity commitments are actually implemented and yield good lessons learned that we can be able to replicate in other sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Uganda is a very, very good point because we know we have worked a lot in Uganda. We did a national workshop in Uganda, or actually two, to help them build their position to the GBF. So we've done this in many countries and with many groups of stakeholders. This is just a selection of them. I have Fred here from NEMA. So perhaps you want to take the floor and speak a little bit about our collaboration.
Yes, thank you, colleagues and partners. I'm Fred Onyai from National Environment Management Authority in Uganda. My colleague Carol work in the same government. As she has said, already we have got commitments in a number of sectors that have been facilitated by the BioDev 2030 project, which is funded by France, but basically it is being conducted by WWF Uganda country office. And we have done quite good work by having a number of commitments, particularly in the area of energy, agriculture, and of course forestry linked to energy, and also other areas of legislation and enforcement and environment management. As she has said, we need to upscale, not upscale, but we need to implement the commitments because we don't want them to remain on paper. So such partnership with the EU and the other development partners is really very important. And we would like to thank EU particularly because we have already been committed to implement the GBF even before the adoption. Because already we have a project in Uganda that is being connected by Hugo and the team, and we are going to promote 2 areas. That is already target 1 under spatial planning for one of the municipalities in Uganda, one of an incoming city. Then the other one is target 2 on the restoration, where they're going to help us to develop some strategies and most probably some pilot activities. So we really call upon, especially our colleagues from the southern part of the world, the South American countries. We need to really have a serious collaboration because we belong to the same tropics and we have the same environment. If you can travel to Uganda, for us who have traveled to Brazil, we know that we're in the same environment. So we have the same problems. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I just want to have one final word to say thank you to my amazing team, to the team for this project. They are, some of them are new. They've been here for 2-3 months, but they have really made their best effort and they have made an amazing job and they have made this possible. We've had lots of events here. This is the last one. So I would like to ask you, if possible, to clap for the team. And I wish you a good afternoon and a good implementation of the GBF. Goodbye.
Hello, we're going to start with the next session in 1 minute. So if you would like to join us for the session, please, you're welcome to take a seat. It will be on Reverse the Red. Okay, we will welcome you to take a seat. We will start now with the next session. My name is Martin Sordan. I'm the Executive Director of the World Associations of Zoos and Aquarium, and it's a great pleasure to be with you here today. So many of you probably heard about the IPBES report in 2019, sharing that over 1 million species